When IDW announced that they had acquired the rights to My Little Pony and planned on making a comic book adaptation of it, to say that I was unenthused would be an understatement. After all, the recently released, at the time, European comic was pretty deplorable, and all the examples of media that we've gotten here in the States hadn't fared any better.
Hello, friends. My name is Rarity. My cutie mark is 3 diamonds. I love fashion and anything that sparkles.
MLP had pretty much universally gotten the short end of the stick in its official merchandising endeavors up until that point, so there was no real reason to think that an IDW comic would fare any better, nor be anything more than a transparent cash grab, until you stopped to take a look at the talent behind the book. As soon as I knew the names for the people behind MLP number 1, I decided to do a quick Google search and see what we were in for. Surprisingly, the team wasn't a slipshod group of nobodies who had no right to be making a comic book about anything. On the contrary, they were veterans with a lot of work under their respective belts. The first name I decided to check out was Andy Price, and I stumbled across his personal DeviantArt gallery and was floored by the quality on display. His work was incredibly organic, using bright colors and strong line work, and even more amazingly was that all of his coloring was done traditionally, a rarity these days. But what sealed the deal for me was that even though the book wasn't due out for another few months, Price already had quite a few pieces of pony work in his gallery, and they were just as stunning as his other works. This was a far cry from the stock vectors and environments that had plagued almost every piece of MLP merchandise that had been released thus far. Price was giving his ponies just as much love and attention as any other piece. Not only that, but judging by some of the situations his pieces were showcasing, it was clear that Price understood all the characters and their mannerisms, and the comments included with the works reflected that same thing. Clearly, the MLP book wasn't a gig the guy had begrudgingly taken up to pay the bills. Price was a fan of the franchise. He knew a lot about the characters and world and had obvious passion behind the work he was doing on this book. It was here, going through his gallery and seeing his work, that I began to get excited about the possibility of a second source of storytelling set in Equestria with the same great level of quality one would expect from the show.
So, imagine my surprise then when the first arc of the My Little Pony comics, issues 1 through 4, do something even better. They surpass it. I'm Tommy Oliver, and this is a review of the first arc of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, the IDW comic series.
The star of the show when it came to this arc was equally the art and the writing, but if I was forced to pick just one, I'd have to go with the writing. Katie Cook, the other half of this book's genius, truly captures the magic of the world of Equestria, while somehow finding a way to write the characters even smarter than in the show, her words somehow subtly more intelligent than even what DHX has been able to manage with the show proper, while still keeping the books just as accessible to any age demographic. The characters feel smarter, wittier, and, dare I say, better? As a result, the book's happenings feel a lot more self-aware without being blatant or jarring. It's really difficult to put into words what I mean by this, and this is easily the most abstract part of explaining the appeal of these comics. It's something that you can only really understand by picking up a copy of the book and reading it for yourself. Something a bit easier to communicate though is how well the cast are written. Characterization throughout is spot on, at times having the characters reach even greater heights in the show that spawned them. There was a literal laugh-out-loud moment for me with Fluttershy of all ponies, and if you know me, you know what an achievement that is. The Crusaders are a major part of this arc's plot and continually pop up, and the way they interact with Chrysalis and the Changelings is fantastic, delivering some of the book's funniest moments, also allowing some of Price's best work to surface with Chrysalis' facial expressions in response to their antics. The plot of the book as well deserves some major props. The comics, even up to where they are currently in issue 20 as of this writing, have done an amazing job of harnessing a lot of the untapped potential of Equestria as a location, as well as the inhabitants therein that the series has produced over its 4-season run, expanding on and revisiting plot points and characters, as well as introducing situations that are just out of reach or a bit too risky for a TV show airing on an all-ages network like The Hub. The first arc set the standard for this recognition of potential, so of course is no exception. And the first 4 issues of the MLP comic chronicle the return of Queen Chrysalis and the Changeling Swarm, showing us what happened to them after their expulsion from Canterlot and their reaction to their defeat.
Most of us have written off the characters of the Changelings after the end of the Season 2 finale. After all, the show doesn't really do much in terms of direct continuity, even though the show had left a ton of room for further exploration of these characters. And that's what's great about the comics. It takes this kind of ignored potential that the show kind of leaves hanging around and capitalizes on it. And as one would expect, it was delightful to see.
Even more so though, Katie and Andy clearly understood Chrysalis and the Changelings as villains, and leveraged the creature's archetype so much better than their initial appearance in Canterlot Wedding. Whereas in those episodes, the Changelings are characterized as being stealthy infiltrators, only to then wage an open war, here in the comics, Chrysalis and her minions leverage their capabilities to the fullest, using deception and infiltration to their advantage as they try to subtly undermine the main six and turn them against each other instead of outright challenging them. It's a much more competent use of the character's abilities and felt far more in line with their archetype.
Not everything about the book is perfect, though. There were a few odd missteps here and there.
Most notably, in the beginning of the book, the pacing here is a bit rushed, with the entire setup scenario happening at Mach speed compared to the rest of the story. This in and of itself is unfortunate, but these events are merely a catalyst for the bulk of the book, so it's not that damaging. What is a bit more noticeable, and a bit more damaging, is the fact that the device used in this catalyst action is that the main six notice that everyone in town are acting like zombies, with Twilight deducing that they're all changelings in disguise, referencing notes compiled based on their previous encounter with them in Canterlot. Not only did these characters never really interact with any changelings incognito during those events, but the only time they see the changelings in disguise were when they were fighting their doppelgangers or interacting with Chrysalis, disguised as Cadence, who was clearly not acting zombified, and fooled them all for the majority of that story. Add to the fact that later on in these comics, the changelings disguise themselves and mess with the main six, interacting normal and not zombified, and this whole intro feels rather forced, happening only to get the story going, and seems to clash with an otherwise competent handling of this franchise's characters.
With all the strong writing going on in the rest of the book, I think Katie and Andy could have mustered up something that was a bit more competent.
The third act also uses Pinkie Pie's randomness factor as a sort of deus ex machina when they back the main six into a corner, which felt a bit lazy and uncreative to me, a fact made all the more jarring when the rest of the arc's storyline succeeded so well in dodging narrative trappings like this. And like much of the show's adventure arcs, it starts to get a bit too Twilight reliant during the climax of the conflict for my liking, reducing the remaining five to spectators during the final battle with Chrysalis, though I will say that final scene is fantastically drawn and choreographed, so for what it is, it's really well done.
And that kind of brings me to Price's work in general in this book. If there's one thing Andy is really good at, it's expressions.
All of Price's ponies emote incredibly well, with some of the best facial expressions I've ever seen in any comic book. Without the limitations of puppet animation, the ponies in the comics can pull off some crazy facial expressions and some dynamic foreshortening that transcend the limitations of Flash 8 that DHX faces when animating the show proper. There are some amazing close-up shots in these books, primarily of Chrysalis, that have an attention to detail only possible in this kind of format, and are pretty incredible when compared to the streamlined style that the show has to settle with in order to be easily animated. In addition, the set pieces and environments that Price brings to the table are similarly stunning, with the Changeling Castle in particular having some jaw-dropping levels of detail. There is a downside, however. Whether it's something inherent to Price's art style, or simply being so conditioned to the series itself, Price's ponies don't have the greatest amount of visual consistency. Proportions and relative sizings of characters' features change subtly from panel to panel, sometimes to a distracting degree. This can occasionally carry over to a character's entire body, with the ponies getting squashed and stretched a bit more than I personally would have liked. Again though, I can't place the blame for this squarely on Price, as this is going to happen to some degree regardless whenever hand-drawn illustrations are done. I think the reason this stuck out to me so much is that the TV show uses puppet animation. Therefore, all the characters always look 100% identical in every single shot of the entire show, because they're always using the same assets. It's impossible for them to be off-model. After being conditioned to see these characters unchanging for so long, going to a more traditional illustration style makes these subtle variations all the more noticeable. These complaints may sound like I'm grasping, but that's only because I am. The minor issues don't even come close to ruining what is the best piece of official MLP media ever to be released. Issues 1 through 4 of the My Little Pony comics blew my expectations away and stunned me with their quality, not only compared to its peers from the franchise at the time, but just as an example of all ages media in general. If you're a fan of Friendship is Magic and you still haven't checked out the official MLP comics, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. With faithful characterization, hilarious gags, high quality writing and illustration, and some thoughtful consideration to expanding the lore of the world of Equestria, not only are the MLP comics worthy of being compared to the show they complement, but in a lot of ways, they even manage to be its better.
So now I have a question for you guys. We've seen a lot of modern cartoons get comic book adaptations. We have My Little Pony, we have Regular Show, we have Adventure Time, we have Bravest Warriors, and countless others. Even the Powerpuff Girls and Samurai Jack just got a comic book revival. So my question is there a cartoon that you would like to see get a comic book adaptation? Either one that's already currently running, or get a revival of something from your childhood? Let me know in the comments below. I'll make sure to mention some of my favorite comments in the Q&A video I do in response to this video next week. So if you aren't subscribed yet, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss it. If you have questions for me about the first 4 issues of the My Little Pony comic, or rebuttals or comments on the books themselves, feel free to let me know in a comment below, or on my Tumblr or Twitter, both of which you can find links for in the description. And if you like this video and you want to help keep me fed, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Link to that is also in the description. It gives you access to some extra goodies that you wouldn't otherwise get. Till next time, Tommy Oliver. Stay curious.